ओम ज्ञानतिमिरन्धस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मिलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। नमो ओम विष्णुपादाय कृष्णपृष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदान्तस्वामिनिति नामिने। नमस्ते सरस्वती देवे गुरुवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्य देशतारिणे। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासदि गौरभक्तवृंद। हरे कृष्णा कृष्ण कृष्णा हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे। So if you see, this chapter is called Fundamental Principles of Material Nature. And why it is important is because the living entities in this material world, they are conditioned in this material nature. So it is important for us to know what is this material nature, how it begins, how it acts, how it binds. All those things are very important. That's how you find in 14th chapter, it is rebounding. In 14th chapter, Krishna is saying, when he begins description of the three modes of material nature, Krishna, he says, again I shall declare to you the supreme wisdom, the best of all knowledge, knowing which all the sages have attained to supreme perfection. So you can see here, this also 14th chapter, it comes in the middle 6 chapters. The first 6 chapters are like the cover. The last 6 chapters are also like the conclusion, the cover. And the most important matter is given in the middle 6 chapters. And these chapters actually gives the essence of Bhagavad Gita. So here Lord Krishna is describing that this knowledge which he is going to reveal now is actually best of the knowledge, knowing which the great sages have attained supreme perfection. This is because unless we understand how we are entangled in this material nature, and we get a desire to come out of these modes of material nature, spiritual life does not begin. If we don't even know that we are diseased, where is the question of curing the disease? Isn't it? In that sense, it is very essential. In that sense, it is considered to be superior knowledge not in the terms of Krishna has described the knowledge of the Absolute in the 7th chapter, the knowledge of the Absolute. But this knowledge which the Lord is describing here is considered to be more superior in the sense of understanding that if we don't even know that we are entangled in this material world, that we are covered by Maya, where is the question of understanding the supreme absolute truth? Absolute truth can be understood when we have become purified of the 3 modes of material nature. When we have come out of the 3 modes of material nature, then we can understand the absolute truth. So no doubt, the knowledge of the absolute truth is the supermost. Relatively, because we are conditioned, this knowledge is considered to be better, because this is the beginning of understanding our entanglement, and then we can try to purify our existence, and then we can try to understand the Supreme Lord. So, very nicely Prabhupada explains in the purport, from the 7th chapter to the end of the 12th chapter, Shri Krishna in detail reveals the absolute truth, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So, from 7th chapter onwards, up to the end of 12th chapter, Krishna describes about absolute truth. Now the Lord Himself is further enlightening Arjuna. And further now, after giving the knowledge about the absolute truth, now He is further enlightening Arjuna. If one understands this chapter through the process of philosophical speculation, he will come to an understanding of devotional service. In the 13th chapter, it was clearly explained that by humbly developing knowledge, one may possibly be freed from material entanglement. So, knowledge begins by understanding our humble position. And Prabhupada says that is the beginning of knowledge. Humility. It is one of the very important aspects of knowledge. Amanitvam. So, the spiritual knowledge actually begins from the point of humility. It has also been explained that it is due to association with the modes of nature that the living entity is entangled in the material world. So it is also explained, like in 13th chapter, about how the living entity becomes entangled because of the 3 modes of material nature in this material world. Now in this chapter, the Supreme Personality explains what those modes of nature are, how they act, how they bind, how they give liberation. You see. So why this knowledge is important, Prabhupada is explaining. Why the Lord is saying this is knowledge superior. The knowledge explained in this chapter is proclaimed by the Supreme Lord to be superior to the knowledge given in so far in other chapters. So in that sense it is considered to be superior, because here the Lord is explaining how we become entangled in this material existence by the 3 modes of material nature. What these 3 modes of material nature are, how they are acting, how they bind, and how by utilizing them one can get liberated. All this is explained in this. By understanding this knowledge, various great sages attain perfection and transfer to the spiritual world. The Lord now explains the same knowledge in a better way. This knowledge is far, far superior to all other processes of knowledge thus far explained. And knowing this, many attain perfection. Thus, it is expected that one who understands the 14th chapter will attain perfection. So, that is why it is considered to be very important. Because we may wonder, Bhagavad Gita also, all these things are described, how creation takes place, how the living entity is bound. Now you will find Lord Kapila starts explaining about how the different material elements comes into existence, then how from subtle they develop into gross, how three modes of material nature gives differentiation to all varieties of life in this material existence, varieties of actions in this material world. All those things will be described. So one may wonder why all these things I have to study. I know Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, isn't it? The point is, theoretically knowing Krishna to be Supreme Personality of Godhead is different from being convinced. If we know Krishna to be Supreme Personality of Godhead, like the Vrajavasis, the Vrindavan Vasis, then you don't require to study this knowledge, isn't it? But because our faith is not very strong, so scientifically understanding all these different aspects of knowledge, as it is said even in Ishopanishad, we have to understand about avidya also. Unless you know where there is pit, where there is road, then we will not be able to differentiate. Just like it is said, Bhagavatam is Paramahamsa Samhita. So we have to learn to become Paramahamsa. And Paramahamsa means differentiating, understanding the difference between matter and spirit. Paramahamsa, after understanding what is material, what is spiritual, they only take spiritual and they give up material. So unless you know what is material and what is spiritual, then how you can differentiate? First of all, you should know what is material. Then you can differentiate. So, this knowledge is actually very important knowledge. We should not simply neglect it. Sometimes, we skip through them and just go through it. No, we should try to understand properly how this material nature works. And we will understand that actually above this material nature, the living entities are superior. We will be able to understand this fact. We will be able to understand that these two prakritis are there. I am entangled in a lower prakriti now. Actually, I am superior. Then we will also understand, by understanding this knowledge, that I cannot become disentangled from this entanglement by any kind of philosophical speculation. it is not possible. By our material endeavor, it is not possible. By our material senses, mind, intelligence, it is not possible. And it is possible only by surrendering process of devotional service. So all these things we will be able to understand. It is said that unless, at least in this material world, unless one has suffered, one cannot understand what is material happiness. Isn't it? So the darker side also we should know. How this material nature creates suffering for us. Otherwise, what will happen if we don't understand this properly? We will take it as granted. It's a part of material world. It's a part of our life. I have to suffer, isn't it? So questioning begins when we are trying to understand that actually I am different from matter. Why matter is entangling me? I am superior from matter. Why I should suffer in the hands of matter? So, in that sense, it is essential. So here, Lord Kapila, he starts explaining about subtle material nature. So what is he explaining? He explains, Devahuti had asked, O Supreme Personality of Godhead, kindly explain the characteristic of the Supreme Person and His energies. For both of these are causes of the manifest and unmanifest creation. So as Devahuti had asked that please explain about the energy, your energies. How the living entity is also your energy and this material nature is also your energy, and how they combine together and this whole material manifestation comes out. Please explain about this. How this combination takes place. They are two distinct energy altogether, nothing to do with each other. How exactly they become mixed up? This question was asked. So now Lord Kapila starts explaining how this happens. And this is how he begins. Yat tat trigunam avyaktam nityam sad asad atmakam pradhanam prakritim prahur avishesham visheshavat. So the Lord explains that originally this Prakriti which is manifest now, which we can see now with varieties, actually is without variety. This is very important. Originally, it has no real varieties. Real varieties all exist in the spiritual world. These are all illusory varieties because originally Prakriti exists as Pradhan, varietyless, differentiationless. Later on, because of the desires of the living entity, the Supreme Lord creates variety through three modes of material nature. He infests this material energy with three modes to create variety. And that is how varieties comes out. So, here very nicely Prabhupada explains some subtle differences between Prakriti and Pradhan, although it is nearly one and the same. Prakriti is not eternal. Even though we say Prakriti is not eternal in the sense, it is called Prakriti when it is manifested into varieties. Because varieties are not eternal in this material existence, so it is called Prakriti is not eternal. That state of existence where we see manifestation of varieties is called Prakriti. Simple term. When we see manifestations of variety, it is called Prakriti. And when it exists without variety prior to manifestation, just prior to manifestation, it is called Pradhan. Pradhan is called without varieties and it is eternal because that is the material energy of the Lord, which is not having actually varieties. But the Lord creates variety for the living entities in this material world, illusory varieties. So this is the essence of what it is explained here. Then further Prabhupada explains some little differences between Mahatattva and Pradhan and Brahman. So some slight minute differences Prabhupada very nicely explains here. So I'll just read this. The Lord points out material nature in its subtle stage, which is called Pradhan. So material nature in its subtle stage is called Pradhan. And he analyzes this Pradhan. And then he is analyzing what is this Pradhan. How is he analyzing? So here he will say varietyless, nirvisheshvat, see, avisheshat and visheshavat. When it is avisheshavat, it is called Pradhan. Moment variety is visheshavat, it will be called Prakriti. So he is analyzing. And then he will also explain it is eternal. Nityam sat asat atmakam. So that which gives rise to varieties of cause and effects, that is eternal. Sat asat is nothing but cause and effect is called sat and asat. So here we see a lot of causes and effects. That which gives rise to this cause and effect in this material world, that is eternal. That is called Pradhan. So Prabhupada is explaining. The explanation of Pradhan and Prakriti is that Pradhan is the subtle, undifferentiated sum total of all material elements. When the material elements are not differentiated, it is present in its subtle form, that is called as Pradhan. Although they are undifferentiated, one can understand that the total material elements are contained therein. They are not differentiated. You cannot understand water, earth, air, fire, ether. Only when it manifests in Prakriti form you can see there is water, there is earth, there is ether, all these material elements are there. When it is not differentiated, you cannot make out anything. Whether it is water, whether it is earth, whether it is fire, it is undifferentiated. It is present as aggregate, but you cannot make out. It is not manifest in that state. That is called Pradhan. But it is contained. All these elements are there. When the total material elements are manifested by the interaction of three modes of material nature, the manifestation is called Prakriti. See? So, when Pradhan is acted upon by three modes of material nature, the three modes of material nature differentiates it into Prakriti. So, when the total material elements are manifested by the interaction of the three modes of material nature, the manifestation is called Prakriti. Now Prabhupada explains, impersonalists, they say that Brahman is without variegatedness and without differentiation. Now you see, because, so they will think like this only. Now Pradhan is described as undifferentiated, unmanifested, varietyless, correct? Prakriti is described as with varieties. Similarly, Brahman is also described like this: varietyless, undifferentiated, non-dual, no duality. Right? So, now Prabhupada says, what do the monists say then? One may say that Pradhan is the Brahman stage, but actually the Brahman stage is not Pradhan. Pradhan is distinct from Brahman because in Brahman there is no existence of material modes of nature. See, how it is different is the presence of three modes of material nature in Pradhan and absence of three modes of material nature in Brahman. That is how actually it is different. It is not one and the same. We should not mistake. Even though in real terms everything is Brahman. Sarvam khalau idam Brahman. You see, that also we'll try to understand. How we understand everything is Brahman. Because originally everything is spiritual. Because for the Lord there is nothing called material. For the Lord there is no such distinction. This is material, this is spiritual. Difference is for us. This differentiation, and we have to make what can be done, because for us it is different. So that is why when the Lord comes, for him there is no difference. He comes here or he is in the spiritual world, there is no difference for him. It is just like the governor goes in the prison house, there is no difference for the governor. He is not a prisoner there. For us there is a difference. We go to prison house, there is a difference. And we stay out of prison house, there is a difference. Even though everything is a part of the same state. So in that sense everything is Brahman. Just like it is, everything is a part of the same state. But for us, because there is difference, so that distinction we have to understand. That this part of the Brahman entangles the living entity. You see? And of course, when we become completely liberated, then just like the Supreme Lord, even though we may be existing in this part of the material world, it is Vaikuntha. It's very simple. So Prabhupada, just like when he was giving classes in America, Prabhupada was saying, I am not in material world, because we exist through our consciousness. So if my consciousness is completely in the Supreme, then I don't exist in the material world, even though physically I may exist. We become transcendental. This material nature does not act like material for us at that time. For a pure devotee, that is why it is said, pure devotee's body should not be considered material, even though seemingly it is also made up of 5 elements, because it ceases to act materially. It is spiritual. So in that sense, everything is spiritual. But in conditioned state, we have to differentiate. This is material, this is spiritual. Right? Sanatana Goswami Prabhupada explains why he kept touchstone in the dustbin. Actually, for him there is no distinction. For him there is no distinction. But he kept it in touchstone to teach the neophyte. You should distinguish. Till we come to the point of Paramahamsa, you have to distinguish. This is material, this is binding. The more I accumulate of this, I will get entangled. Janma Aishwarya Shruta Shrivi Edamana Madah Puman. This will intoxicate me more and more. The less I possess, the better it is. So in that stage, we have to distinguish. But in ultimate stage, when one becomes completely free from entanglement, for him there is no distinction. Then yes, then he can understand Sarvam Khalau Idam Brahman, everything is Brahman. And that is how we find distinction between neophyte and Paramahamsa, Mahabhagavata devotee. Neophyte has to distinguish. He has to see, this man is envious, we should avoid him. Correct? We have to avoid somebody who is envious. For Paramahamsa, there is no such distinction. He is envious, he is not envious. For us, we have to distinguish. When we advance little bit more, then we have to understand, yes, Maitri, with devotees I should do friendship. And for those who are not engaged, I should have Kripa. I should preach to them. And when we come to the final stage, Paramahamsa, then he understands, everybody else is engaged. I am not engaged in service of the Lord. Everybody is better than me. You see? Now we cannot see like this. We have to distinguish. Isn't it? So, that is how we have to understand. That difference is there. Otherwise, no doubt, everything is Brahman. So that is what Prabhupada is explaining. That in Brahman, there is no 3 modes of material nature, action of 3 modes of material nature. But in Pradhan, you can find action is there, 3 modes of material nature. In Bhagavad Gita, if you see, that is why this Mahat Tattva is called Brahman. Mahat Yoni, Mahat Brahma. If you see that, it is there. I think it is in the third verse. The total material substance called Brahman is the source of birth, and it is that Brahman that I impregnate, making possible the birth of all living beings, O son of Bharata. Mama Yoni Mahat Brahma. See? There the Lord is calling this part of material world, which is called Mahat Tattva, as Mahat Brahman. Yes, because it is a part of the Brahman in that sense. So, Prabhupada in purport very nicely explains about this. This is an explanation of the word. Everything that takes place is due to the combination of Kshetra and Kshetragna, the body and the spirit soul. This combination of material nature and the living entity is made possible by the Supreme Lord Himself. The Mahat Tattva is the total cause of the total cosmic manifestation. And because in the total substance of the material cause, there are three modes of nature, it is sometimes called Brahman. The Supreme Personality impregnates the total substance, and thus innumerable universes becomes possible. So, Devaki, in her prayers in the 10th canto, when she is praying to the Lord, before the Lord comes in the womb of Mother Devaki, so there is a very nice prayer where some glimpses of understanding subtle difference between Mahat Tattva and Pradhan. Pradhan, as it is explained here, is the original material energy of the Lord, which has no varieties. It is undifferentiated, but it is eternal energy of the Lord. So that is how we understand. So there she prays that after many millions of years of creation, when Brahma comes to the end of his life, the annihilation of cosmic manifestation takes place. So when Brahma is nearing his death, his life is coming to the end, then there is complete pralaya. So then she explains what happens at the time of pralaya. The five elements, they enter into Mahat Tattva. See, the five elements, this Panchabhuta, they enter back into Mahat Tattva. Mahat Tattva enters into non-manifest total material energy, and which enters into Pradhan. So Pradhan, there is something called non-manifest total material energy. You see, which has three modes of material nature, 24 elements, all those things, and which further into another subtle form becomes Mahat Tattva, and then the Lord glances and agitates Mahat Tattva, and then all this manifestation becomes possible. So you can see how she is saying. Five elements enter into Mahat Tattva. Mahat Tattva enters into total non-manifest material energy, which enters into Pradhan, which is completely unmanifest, undifferentiated, eternal energy of the Lord. So this is a subtle difference between Mahat Tattva and Pradhan also in that sense. So Prabhupada is explaining in very simple term, when it is manifested, it is called Prakriti. When it is not manifested, it is called Pradhan. So we'll stop with this Granthra Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Jagat Guru Srila Prabhupada ki jai.